His duty was complete, but the alien goddesses demanded one final night. The final negotiation, Julian Reeves stood at the viewport of the diplomatic vessel, watching as the crystalline spires of Nix 7 grew larger against the backdrop of twin moons. After 15 years in interstellar politics and 3 years of delicate negotiations with the Lumina, this moment represented the culmination of his life's work. Peace between Earth and a species humans had once believed to be living stars. "Ambassador, we're beginning our descent," said Commander Chen, interrupting his thoughts. "The Lumina delegation awaits at the northern pavilion." Julian nodded, straightening the collar of his formal attire, midnight blue with silver embroidery designed specifically for this occasion. The fabric felt heavy on his shoulders, much like the responsibility he carried. "This treaty represents more than just the end of hostilities," Julian said, more to himself than to Chen. "It's an acknowledgement that we were wrong about them. They aren't the emotional vampires we feared." The ship glided through the atmosphere, revealing sprawling cities that seemed to pulse with inner light. The Lumina architecture mirrored their physiology, translucent structures that channeled and amplified emotional energy, their primary resource and the source of misunderstanding that had led to decades of conflict. Upon landing, Julian was greeted by Telmar, his Lumina counterpart whose form shimmered between solid and ethereal. "Ambassador Reeves, welcome back to Nix 7. The council is assembled." They walked together through corridors that hummed with subtle energy. Julian had learned to recognize the emotional signatures in the air. This one carried anticipation and cautious hope, a good sign for the negotiations ahead. The council chamber opened before them, a perfect dome where 7 Lumina elders hovered in a semicircle. At their center stood Solari, High Counselor whose luminescence outshone her peers. Unlike the others whose forms shifted constantly, Solari maintained a more humanoid appearance, a courtesy to Julian that he deeply appreciated. "Ambassador," Solari's voice resonated in the chamber, "we have reviewed the final amendments. Your proposed protections for emotional sovereignty are acceptable." Julian approached the center podium, where the treaty document, both digital and inscribed on crystal, awaited his signature. "High Counselor, Earth extends its gratitude for your patience and willingness to overcome our mutual distrust." As he placed his hand on the crystal to formalize the agreement, Julian noticed Solari exchanging glances with another council member, Niara, the youngest among them, whose glow pulsed with an intensity that seemed almost improper in this formal setting. "Before we conclude," Solari said as the treaty absorbed Julian's biometric signature, "the council requests your participation in the Twilight Communion tomorrow evening. It would honor us if you would remain as our guest for one more night on Nix 7. Julian hesitated. His departure was scheduled for dawn, and extending his stay wasn't part of the mission parameters. But diplomatic instinct told him this request carried significance beyond protocol. "The Twilight Communion?" he inquired, aware that his understanding of Lumina culture remained incomplete despite years of study. "A ritual of shared understanding." Niara spoke for the first time, her voice like wind through crystal chimes. "It would be meaningful to complete our peace this way." Julian felt something pass between them. Curiosity, perhaps, or recognition of something unspoken. His duty was technically complete, but something in Niara's gaze suggested that true peace might require one more gesture. "I would be honored," he replied, unaware that his decision would forever alter the course of 2 worlds. Invitation to understanding. The hours following the treaty signing passed in a blur of formal celebrations and diplomatic exchanges. Julian found himself in luxurious guest quarters as evening approached, watching the unique sunset of Nix 7, where light scattered through the crystalline structures of the city, creating cascading rainbows across the horizon. A soft chime announced a visitor. When Julian opened the door, he was surprised to find Niara, the young council member, standing alone. "Ambassador Reeves," she said, her form shimmering slightly with what Julian had learned to recognize as nervousness. "I've come to explain the Twilight Communion and help you prepare." Julian gestured for her to enter. Up close, he noticed the delicate intricacies of her luminescent form, patterns that flowed like liquid starlight beneath a translucent outer layer that approximated human shape. "I admit I accepted without fully understanding what I agreed to," Julian said with a diplomatic smile. "Is this a common ritual after negotiations?" Niara moved to the center of the room, her glow casting soft shadows. No, it is rare and sacred. The communion is a ritual of emotional transparency, a sharing of essence between different beings to foster genuine understanding. Julian's diplomatic training immediately triggered caution. Sharing of essence? You mean a mind link? Not thoughts, but feelings, Niara clarified, her form rippling with earnestness. The misunderstandings between our peoples began because humans feared we fed on emotions. The truth is we resonate with them, amplify and reflect them. The communion would show you this truth in a way words cannot. She approached slowly, raising what resembled a hand toward him, though her fingers seemed to blend into each other, forming gentle waves of light. May I? Julian nodded and she touched his wrist. Immediately he felt a warm current flow through him, carrying with it a sense of peaceful curiosity. Her emotion, he realized, shared directly. That's remarkable, he whispered as she withdrew. The communion is this, but deeper, a complete emotional dialogue. Niara's form brightened. Some on the council worried it might be too intimate for a human, but I told them you were different, that you truly wished to understand us. Julian considered his options carefully. His mission was technically complete. The treaty was signed. But true peace required understanding beyond political agreements. Will others be present? He asked. Just myself and Solari as representatives of the council, Niara replied. The ritual is normally performed in pairs, but as this is diplomatic, Solari will guide us. Something in Niara's manner, a flicker of intensity in her luminescence, suggested there was more to this invitation than official protocol, but Julian couldn't quite interpret the nuance. I'll participate, he decided, for the sake of lasting peace. Niara's form brightened visibly. The ritual begins at the alignment of our moons. I will return for you then. She moved toward the door but paused. Ambassador Julian, thank you. Few humans would trust us enough for this. After she departed, Julian contacted Commander Chen to inform Earth about the delay. It's a cultural exchange, he explained, potentially valuable for future relations. As twilight deepened outside his window, Julian prepared himself mentally for the unknown ritual ahead. His career had been built on understanding alien perspectives, but something told him this encounter would challenge him in ways diplomacy never had. When Niara returned, she wore ceremonial attire, crystalline ornaments that refracted her inner light into complex patterns. She led him through quiet corridors to a secluded chamber within the heart of the city. The luminous sanctum, as she called it, was a perfect sphere lined with responsive crystal that seemed to breathe with the emotional atmosphere of the room. Solari awaited them, her form more defined than usual, an apparent sign of respect. Ambassador Reeves, she greeted him. Are you prepared to know us as we truly are? Revelations in crystal light. The luminous sanctum pulsed gently around them as Solari guided Julian and Niara to the center of the spherical chamber. 3 crystalline pedestals rose from the floor, arranged in a perfect triangle. The twilight communion allows for truth beyond words, Solari explained, her voice resonating through the chamber. You will feel as we feel, Ambassador, and we will experience emotions as humans do, direct, intense, undiluted by our natural diffusion. Julian took his position at one pedestal, noting how the crystal beneath his palms warmed to his touch. Across from him, Niara's form seemed both excited and apprehensive, her luminescence fluctuating in gentle waves. We begin with release, Solari instructed, taking her place at the 3rd pedestal. Let go of diplomatic pretense, of cultural barriers. Here we are simply beings seeking understanding. The crystals began to glow, creating a circuit of light between the 3 of them. Julian felt a strange sensation, as though his emotional center was being gently opened, like curtains drawn back to reveal a window. I will initiate, and then withdraw, Solari explained. The communion is most meaningful when experienced between 2. The chamber darkened until only their 3 forms remained illuminated. Julian felt rather than saw Solari channel a pulse of energy through the crystal circuit. Then came the first wave of alien emotion. It washed over him like an ocean tide, carrying with it an ancient loneliness that nearly brought tears to his eyes. This is the core of Lumina existence. Solari's voice seemed distant now. We experience everything collectively, yet yearn for individual connection. Another wave followed. complex emotional harmonies that human language couldn't capture. Julian understood suddenly why the Lumina had been so difficult to negotiate with. Their emotional language was symphonic while humans communicated in single notes. "I leave you now to the true communion," Solari said, removing her hands from the crystal. The light circuit shifted, now flowing directly between Julian and Niara. When they were alone, Niara's form seemed to intensify. "What you felt was formal, controlled," she said softly. "Would you know what truly lies beneath?" Julian nodded, and Niara's emotional presence surged through the connection. He gasped as raw feelings flowed into him. Curiosity about humans, fascination with their brief, intense lives, and beneath it all, a personal interest in Julian himself that went far beyond diplomacy. "You've been watching me," he realized aloud. "From your first arrival 3 years ago," Niara admitted, her form pulsating with what must have been vulnerability. "Your passion for peace, your willingness to understand, these are rare qualities. I volunteered to study humans because of you." The crystal connection between them deepened, and Julian found himself unconsciously sharing his own emotions, his dedication to his work, the loneliness of diplomatic life, always an outsider everywhere he went, and his growing fascination with Niara's species, particularly with her. "The Council selected you for more than your diplomatic skills," Niara revealed, moving around the pedestals until she stood before him. "We sense emotional capacity, and yours is exceptional for a human. You feel deeply, though you've learned to conceal it." The truth of her words resonated through Julian. His successful diplomacy had always stemmed from genuine empathy, carefully controlled by professional distance. "In our culture," Niara continued, "such emotional depth is treasured." Her form shifted closer, the boundary between them growing less distinct as her luminescence enveloped his physical space. "May I show you how we express appreciation for such resonance?" Julian nodded, and Niara's form partially merged with his outer aura. The sensation was electric, intimate in a way utterly different from human contact, yet somehow more profound. He felt her emotions flowing through him, admiration, hope, and a tenderness that transcended physical form. "This is how we truly connect," she whispered, her voice seemingly inside his mind. "Not feeding on emotion, but sharing it, amplifying it between us." In that moment of connection, Julian saw through Niara's memories, the centuries of Lumina existence, their evolution from energy beings to their current form, and their fundamental misunderstanding by humans who feared what they couldn't understand. "Your people thought we were harvesting emotions," she shared as their consciousnesses intertwined. "But we were trying to communicate, to share our emotional essence as we're doing now." Understanding dawned on Julian with perfect clarity. The treaty he'd just negotiated, while important, was built on incomplete knowledge. True coexistence would require this deeper understanding, this recognition that despite their different forms, their emotional nature was compatible, even complementary. As the ritual connection began to naturally ebb, Julian found himself reluctant to break away. Something profound had shifted between them, something neither diplomatic training nor cultural briefings had prepared him for. "Niara," he whispered as their connection slowly dissipated, "I believe I've misunderstood a great many things." Her form shimmered with what he now recognized as joy. "That," she replied, "is precisely the purpose of the Twilight Communion." Whispers between worlds. The hours following the communion passed in a haze of newfound awareness for Julian. He remained in the luminous sanctum with Niara long after Solari had departed, their conversation flowing as naturally as the emotional current that had connected them during the ritual. "Your people express through words what mine convey through resonance," Niara observed as they walked the perimeter of the chamber, her luminescent form casting gentle light that followed their path. Yet both methods seek the same result: to be understood. Julian nodded, still processing the lingering effects of their connection. "We humans spend lifetimes trying to articulate what you shared with me in moments." He paused, studying the intricate patterns of light that flowed beneath her translucent exterior. "It makes our diplomatic efforts seem inadequate." "Not inadequate," Niara corrected, her form brightening. "Different paths to the same destination. Your persistence in seeking peace, despite our differences, speaks volumes about human potential." They exited the sanctum into a suspended garden where bioluminescent flora created a private universe of gentle light, the twin moons of Nix 7 hung low in the night sky, casting prismatic reflections through the crystalline architecture surrounding them. This garden was created after our first contact with humans, Nyara explained, guiding Julian to a viewing platform. Some among us were fascinated by your concept of cultivating beauty for its own sake. We created these spaces to better understand you. Julian reached toward a floating blossom that pulsed with inner light. To his surprise, it responded to his proximity, its glow intensifying as his fingers neared. They respond to emotional energy, Nyara explained, moving closer to him, like my people. Her proximity sent a subtle current across Julian's skin, not uncomfortable but intimate in a way that transcended physical sensation. Since the communion, he found himself increasingly attuned to the emotional field that surrounded her. I should tell you something, Julian said, turning to face her directly. My departure has been scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. The treaty is complete and Earth expects my return. Nyara's luminescence dimmed slightly, creating shadowed patterns across her form. So soon? I had hoped. She hesitated, then continued with what Julian now recognized as determined resolve in the intensification of her central core. There is much more I wish to show you about my world. Julian felt the weight of duty pressing against something new and undefined that had awakened during their communion. What would you show me if time allowed? Instead of answering with words, Nyara extended her hand. When Julian took it, a controlled wave of emotion flowed between them, longing, curiosity, and something deeper that reminded him of what humans might call desire, though it carried nuances no human word could capture. I would show you this, she whispered as the connection between them strengthened, less intense than the formal ritual but more personal, how two different beings might create something neither could experience alone. Julian felt his diplomatic, reserved the professional distance he had maintained through countless alien encounters begin to dissolve. With any other species, with any other individual, he would have stepped back, re-established boundaries. Instead, he found himself responding, allowing his own emotions to flow outward toward her. Is this permitted? He asked, aware of his position as Earth's representative. This is unprecedented, Nyara admitted, her form shifting closer until the boundary between them began to blur. But the treaty is signed. You are no longer just an ambassador, and I am not just a council member. We are ourselves now. As the night deepened around them, Julian and Nyara created a new language between them, part emotional resonance, part physical proximity. Her luminescent form partially enveloped him in a cocoon of gentle energy that responded to his emotions, while he offered the intensity and focus of human feeling that she found so fascinating. When Nyara's essence brushed against his consciousness, Julian understood that what transpired between them transcended the physical intimacy humans knew. Their connection existed on multiple planes simultaneously, emotional currents intertwining, creating patterns of shared experience that left both transformed. My people will not understand this, Julian whispered as they rested together beneath the alien sky, his human form nestled within her luminescent embrace. Nor will mine, Nyara responded, her voice resonating both in the air and directly within his mind. But perhaps that is why it matters. We become the bridge between worlds. As dawn approached, casting its first tentative light across the crystalline city, Julian realized with sudden clarity that his mission had evolved far beyond diplomatic resolution. What had begun as duty had transformed into something neither world had anticipated, a connection that offered possibilities beyond peaceful coexistence. I must contact Earth, he said as they reluctantly separated, reality intruding on their shared moment. My scheduled departure. Nyara's form dimmed slightly. What will you tell them? Julian considered the diplomatic language at his disposal, the careful words that had served him throughout his career. None seemed adequate for what he needed to express. The truth, he finally decided, that there is more to discover here. That lasting peace requires deeper understanding than we've achieved. The look they exchanged contained volumes that words in any language could never express. Dawn of Two Worlds. The communications chamber within the diplomatic compound hummed with tension as Julian faced the holographic projection of Admiral Vega, his superior at Earth's Interstellar Affairs Division. Let me understand this, Ambassador, the Admiral said, her expression carefully neutral, though Julian could detect the undercurrent of concern. "You're requesting an extension of your mission for cultural integration purposes, after the treaty has been formalized." Julian maintained his diplomatic composure despite the tumult of emotions beneath the surface. "Admiral, the Twilight Communion revealed aspects of Lumina society crucial to implementing the treaty effectively. Their emotional communication system is far more complex than our preliminary studies indicated." He paused, carefully selecting his next words. "I believe serving as a cultural liaison during this transition period would strengthen our alliance considerably." The Admiral studied him with the shrewd assessment that had made her legendary in diplomatic circles. "Your dedication is noted, Reeves, but there's something you're not telling me." She leaned forward. "This request comes after 15 years without a single deviation from protocol." "What changed?" Julian thought of Niara waiting outside, her luminescence likely reflecting her anxiety about this conversation. How could he explain what had transpired between them, how a connection forged in emotional transparency had revealed possibilities neither species had contemplated? "What changed," he said carefully, "is my understanding of what peace truly requires. Not just signed agreements, but genuine comprehension between different forms of life. The Lumina aren't just allies, Admiral. They could be partners in ways we never imagined." The Admiral's expression softened slightly. "You've earned enough political capital to make unusual requests, Reeves. I'll grant a 3-month extension for your cultural liaison role. After that, we reassess." Relief washed through Julian. "Thank you, Admiral. One more thing," she added before disconnecting. "Whatever's happening there, remember you represent humanity. Make sure it serves both our interests." The projection faded, leaving Julian alone with the implications of her final comment. She had intuited more than he'd explicitly stated, a skill that had made her formidable in interstellar politics. When he emerged from the communications chamber, Niara's form brightened visibly upon seeing him. "They agreed?" 3 months, Julian confirmed. "It's a start." They walked together through the morning-lit corridors of the diplomatic compound toward the council chambers, where they would present their proposal. The idea had formed between them during their night in the garden, a new initiative that would expand beyond the treaty's formal provisions. "The council has questions," Niara admitted as they approached the grand entrance. "Some fear this connection between us might compromise your objectivity." "And what do you tell them?" Her form shimmered with what Julian had learned to recognize as determination, that true objectivity comes from complete understanding, not distance. That what we've discovered might transform both our civilizations. The council chamber fell silent as they entered together. 7 Lumina elders, including Solari, hovered in their customary semicircle. Julian noted subtle variations in their luminescence, some radiating skepticism, others curiosity. "Ambassador Reeves," Solari began, "Niara has proposed an unprecedented exchange program, human diplomats and scientists experiencing the communion with selected Lumina representatives. She suggests you would lead this initiative." Julian stepped forward, standing beside Niara, whose form subtly brushed against his, in a gesture of solidarity that sent warmth through his consciousness. "High Counselor, what began as a treaty signing has revealed possibilities beyond conventional diplomacy. The emotional resonance your people naturally experience and can share offers a path to understanding that transcends traditional methods." He gestured to the space between them. "Imagine a diplomatic corps that communicates not just with words and documents, but with genuine emotional transparency. Imagine scientific collaboration, where human analytical thinking combines with Lumina intuitive perception." Murmurs of energy rippled through the council as they communicated in their native resonance. Julian waited, having learned when silence carried more impact than words. Finally, Solari's form shifted forward. "Your proposal has merit, Ambassador, but such integration carries risks. The intensity of our emotional field can overwhelm humans unprepared for it." "Which is why we start small," Niara interjected, her tone respectful but firm. "With those like Julian, whose emotional capacity allows for deeper connection, we can develop protocols, establish boundaries." Julian felt a swell of admiration for her courage in challenging the council's caution. In that moment, he recognized that what had begun as an unexpected connection between 2 individuals had evolved into something far more significant, a potential revolution in interspecies relations. I propose a pilot program, Julian added. 5 human representatives selected for their emotional intelligence and adaptability, paired with 5 Lumina volunteers. 3 months of cultural immersion culminating in a modified communion ritual. Solari's form brightened slightly, what Julian had learned to interpret as cautious approval. And you would personally oversee this program? Julian exchanged a glance with Niara, feeling the subtle current of emotion between them even without formal connection. We would oversee it together, as equals. The deliberation among the council took nearly an hour, their luminescent forms shifting in patterns too complex for Julian to interpret fully. When they finally reached consensus, Solari approached them both. The council approves the pilot program, she announced, with conditions to be determined. But we recognize the potential value in this new path. As they left the council chamber, Julian and Niara paused on a balcony overlooking the crystalline city. The morning light refracted through structures that had once seemed alien to Julian, but now held a familiar beauty. What happens when your 3 months end? Niara asked, her form reflecting concern despite the victory they had achieved. Julian considered the question that had lingered unspoken between them since their night in the garden. His career, his life on Earth, his duty to humanity, all weighed against the unprecedented connection they had forged and the possibilities it represented. I don't know, he admitted, reaching toward her, but I believe what we've discovered is too important to abandon, for either of our peoples. As their essences connected once more, human emotion meeting Lumina resonance, Julian understood that they stood at the threshold of something revolutionary, not just peace between species but a new form of existence where the boundaries between different forms of life became permeable, creating something greater than either could achieve alone. Whatever comes next, Niara's voice resonated within his consciousness. We face it together as bridge builders between worlds. Around them, the crystal city pulsed with light that seemed to echo their shared purpose. 2 different beings from distant worlds who had discovered that the greatest diplomatic achievement wasn't a signed treaty, but the courage to forge connections where none had existed before. In the distance, Julian's ship waited, its departure now delayed but still inevitable. Yet as he stood with Niara, their essences intertwined in the morning light, he knew with certainty that whatever path they forged together would transform both their worlds in ways neither could fully imagine. The dawn that broke over Nixie 7 that day illuminated not just the end of hostilities, but the beginning of something unprecedented in the history of interstellar relations, a future where understanding transcended difference, and connection bridged the vast distances between stars.